Hello YouTube, HBZ here today, and today we are going to be reviewing this here, which is the GPD XD. It's the XD1, the XD2. I wasn't lucky enough to get one of those, but I've been after this for a very long time, and I had to go through quite a lot to get the shipping sorted out for it. But I finally did get it, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen reviews for these already, as there really are a lot of reviews out there for this device. But I'm going to do this a little bit different, and I'm just going to chat about why this exists, why this is so important, why this little device is the best that you can get, well, until the GPD Plus comes out anyway. So while this boots, I just want to give you some history. So I've known about this for about 2 years since they released the first model, which is this one, and I've been saving up to buy it. It's a bit expensive, but for what it is, it's absolutely fantastic. It's based on Android. Okay, it has 2 analog sticks, all of the D-pad and A, B, X, Y buttons, and 2 triggers on each side that anyone playing emulator systems could ever hope for. So you've probably noticed that I've already flashed this with something called Legacy ROM, which is the custom firmware. It just adds a lot of performance, and I've used this now for my entire vacation time, the moment I got it up until now. But before we start this, I just thought I'll give you guys a little bit of history, a little bit of a history about emulated systems. So originally, okay, you used to get a dedicated emulator system, and those things were always so expensive that I could never afford them. They were generally developed and designed by 1 or 2 people in the US, UK, and then China produced them. But to be honest, that's always been out of my price range and everyone else's. It's always going to be more or less double what one of these costs. So what most of us used to do is we used to go back in time, and then we'll grab our mobile systems like a Nintendo DS, and we'll stick a flash card in there, and then we'll play the sort of games that was available at the time. Unfortunately, these were extremely limited, and they had bugs, like for instance this one that I just put in suspend that kind of didn't run. The reason for this is the system has a very small processor. It's only like a few hundred megahertz. I think it's 143 or something like that. So you're limited on what you can emulate on these, and that's the main limitation of depending on consumer devices to actually play games or play homebrew. You're extremely limited on what they produced, and unfortunately this is something that hasn't changed much. So you had the Nintendo DS and the PSP, I think, was the main two. Unfortunately, my PSP, the batteries on this, if you put it away for a little while, the battery goes flat, and it eventually goes flat to the point where you can't charge it again, and unfortunately mine is at that stage. But in terms of emulators, this used to be the king. You used to play PSP games on there. You can overclock the processor to 333 megahertz, so it supported everything up to, I'll say, PS1. It didn't do N64 or any other consoles from that generation, so everything older than PS1 you could basically emulate on one of these and it'll be perfectly fine. Some problems with, for instance, the Mega Drive, because of the screen resolution, there was some tearing and things there, but it's not the end of the world. But around about the time of the PSP's release, and I would say the height of homebrew on the go, you had a single company that no one else expected pop up, and they released this little thing here called the Dingo. Sorry, shadows here are a bit bad. The Dingo A320, which is this device here. And this little thing you can hack, and you can install Linux. It was quite a process, and you can run homebrew on it. But once again, this is a very slow processor in comparison to everything else. So the most that you could do was a tiny little bit of PS1 gaming if it wasn't 3D. Everything else kind of didn't work great on it. But the difference is this is still for me the sweet spot in terms of size, because this you can put in your pocket and you can take it with, and it's what I used to take in my work bag when I went to work. I went to places, because if I had some spare time I could just grab the system, play some games, really enjoy myself, spend a few minutes, and no one would really bat an eyebrow, because it's not a big thing, so it didn't look like I was too serious about what I was doing if I ripped this out and I played it. While if I took out a PSP, for instance, it's a bit too serious. It looks like I'm doing professional gaming or something. And of course, when you're trying to be discreet about things, your work and stuff will notice what you're doing, and it becomes a problem. But this used to be the one that I spent the most of my time on. It had issues though, because you had to manually hack it. The actual OS had a lot of bugs. And one of the biggest bugs was to do with the MMC card. This uses mini MMC, and also, come on, shut down. That's another problem. The shutdown doesn't always work. You have to like hold it up and things. But anyway, so it used MMCs. That there. Oh, sorry, not MMC. It was mini SDs, and you had to get an adapter and you put in your micro SD in there. But this would corrupt over time, so after about 6 or so months you'll have to redo it, and it's a Linux kernel type bug, so it kind of just happened. But this for me is in terms of size, this was the sweet spot. But you kind of gave up on a lot because the screen wasn't the right resolution. Once again, Mega Drive games had a lot of tearing. This would struggle with SNES games like Star Fox. Would struggle quite a bit. That needs a Super FX emulation. It won't be able to do that. But for everything else, the Homebrew community really ported just about everything you can hope for. Open Transport Tycoon was one of them. All of the Doom ports, Duke 3D, everything you could basically run on one of these. And this is quite nice because it fits in your pocket, and when you add a protective bag for it, like a cell phone pouch, it all neatly fits into your bag and you don't have to worry too much. But that brings us now to modern times and what we've got today. I'm just going to move the light a little bit so that you guys can see it a little bit better. I hope that works a bit better. But after time you add this, the GPD XD. Now I'm not going to get too involved in it because I'm sure a lot of people have done videos, but it's almost the exact same size as the DSXL. In fact, I think this is modeled after the 3DS XL, the first one, because you have this lip here that the 3DS XL had. So all of the bags will actually fit this, and I still need to get a bag for it. But you can see the size difference there. The first thing you'll notice is that the screen is absolutely fantastic. It's a 720p screen, meaning everything will scale properly. You won't get any tearing or anything like that. Full capacitive touch, and it works. It's great. The buttons, because it has two thumbsticks, you can do PS1 absolutely amazing on this. Everything you expect runs great. I mean, I've been plowing hours in playing Half-Life on the go, and that for me is the best thing ever. And everything just works well on the system. There is a new version of this coming, and I hope that I get one for review, but I'm probably going to buy one, where they've basically doubled the processor speed.
Welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is
here are
provided for the
fantastic.
security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel. The time is 8:47 a.m. Current topside temperature is 93.
And everything so far I've thrown at it, I couldn't find anything that really slowed it down. Okay, in terms of proper Android games, and the only thing that this system can't do well is PSP emulation and GameCube emulation, but everything else just runs ultra smooth. It's a joy and a pleasure to control. The buttons, there's a little bit of a problem where the buttons are a little bit clicky if you press it sometimes, which it's not really that great. So you'll press it and it'll make an audible click, but that's more or less as I've warmed it in, it's disappeared, so I don't really get that much of a problem with it anymore. Of course, Muppin 64 does take a few seconds to load because it creates this awesome graphics. But even 64 and 64 games play phenomenally well. I was playing a lot of what do you call it, Conker's Bad Fur Day on here, and it just works. Let's try one that I know is a pain. Start recommended settings. Now all of the on-screen things you can disable in the system settings. Normally I do have it disabled. There we go. And it's just an absolute joy. Now, there's a lot of other channels, and I'll probably link them down below, that does a full benchmark of this. I don't see the point in that. And from my side of things, I'm extremely happy with this. The new one has the faster CPU, and that's about it. The only bug that it has is the first time you start it with the firmware, you do get that error once or twice, and then that disappears afterwards. Everything else works well here. What's nice about this as well, while I was on vacation, is there wasn't there's a DSTV, which is like our satellite provider. They had that, but they didn't have anything else other than that. So what I did was I just grabbed an HDMI cable. So there's HDMI out. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's the HDMI out. Okay, and I just hooked that up to the TV and off I went. It has HDMI, headphones, micro SD, USB, and I've been using it for YouTube, Netflix, all of those sort of streaming services, as well as some of the other movies that I loaded. I used MX Player for that, and it plays everything. One thing I want to show you here is, let's take a good example of Duke Nukem 3D. So Duke is notorious for being unplayable due to the control scheme. It really does have an absolute terrible control scheme. Let's close that. Game. So as you can see, if you use the controller, it actually works well, and you can finally play the game. I just wish that someone could do a source port of this and just fix that. But generally, if you had to use these, the game is fairly unplayable, because that sort of stuff, it just doesn't work well. Back. But once you have it mapped, the game actually becomes fully playable. Of course, I'm playing it through a viewfinder, but you get the idea. And to map it, it literally has a button you can press, and then you've got your left and right that you can move, and you just place that over the control you want to use, as close as possible over it, and it then maps the left analog stick to the screen, and you can then use that. So all of the touchscreen games, okay, work fine. I couldn't find a single game I couldn't map out. Of course, you really don't want to play something like Angry Birds using the controller, but everything else works well. The system works great. 3D emulation works fantastic. It's worth noting that there is input lag. There will always be input lag with any sort of emulation system. For me, it's a no problem. You play once, you get used to it. I know that a lot of people complain with games that require you to be extremely precise. I won't recommend playing those games, especially SNES and Famicom emulated. You really should play those on the system that they were meant to be played on. But yeah, it's just a fantastic little system. And I really hope that the Plus lives up to the benchmarks that I've seen. I hope they don't change that CPU, because double the performance of this would mean that you can actually do GameCube. And I can't wait to play Wind Waker on the go, as well as quite a few of the other GameCube games that I've bought. I wonder if there's a PS2 emulator for Android. I would love to see that working as well. But yeah, this whole system works phenomenally well, and I can't tell you enough that this is the way to go. And if you're looking for a system that's portable, that you can put in your pocket, you can take with you, this is the one to get. Don't get those cheap $50 clone systems that you see online. They just don't stack up. There's always going to be delays, and the games aren't going to work the way they're supposed to, and there's going to be lag and things. But on one of these, absolutely perfect. I mean, I even got like Quake 3 and stuff working on here, which was quite amazing. Quake 3 on the go. Start game. So for this you kind of have to like use that and then press there. There. I really hope that I can get the GPD Plus just for myself, because it's a fantastic little system. And there's a lot better reviews that you guys can go out. This thing has been out for 2 years, so everyone and their dog has done a proper review of this. They've dissected it. I just wanted to give you guys my experience. And to end off, I just want to give a little bit of a word of warning. Normally I would recommend using GearBest and using the more expensive shipping option. But unfortunately, Aramex admitted that they're having like a streak of thefts. Everything that says cell phone, which this actually says on the box, will get stolen basically. So I would suggest all you do, just make sure that you take the regular shipping. Just wait for it. It won't get stolen in the post if you do that. That corruption on the screen, you can turn off on-screen controls and that disappears. But the game works, and it works well. Everything works that you can throw at it. It's quick, it's responsive. The battery lasts hours on end. I mean, streaming movies, it lasted me a good 6 hours before I had to recharge it every time. So just that on its own makes it worth it. You can get Netflix to run on here. That's fairly trivial. You have to go to their website and download it. Classic games like Crazy Taxi, Bard's Tale, Carmageddon, all of those just kind of work. I'm really impressed by this, and if Sony or Microsoft can come out with a product that's half as good as this, and you can hack it for homebrew, that'll bring the retail stuff back into spec, but I doubt that'll ever happen. If they do release something like that, all of us will be extremely happy, but I doubt they're going to. You do have the NVIDIA Shield, but once again, it's about double the price of this, and you can't expect to compare the two if it's double the price. As you can see, Netflix works. The one thing that I will say is there's a bit of a bug, but I think that's because I'm running custom firmware. If you run YouTube on HDMI out at lower resolution, the screen flickers. Easy enough to sort out. Stream at 720p, but nonetheless. Everything else works as you would expect it to work. System is great. Battery life is amazing. And I just can't tell you enough how good of a system this is. And just to end off, let's quickly go through the box. So in the box, you basically add the system, you get a Chinese power supply and a USB cable and a manual. That's it. Right, that's about 20 minutes now, and from my side of things, it's just amazing how far we've come from that to that, well, that to that to that, and then finally this. And I would love to see where we go from now on. I would personally love it if they use cell phone technology, like a glass screen. A glass screen that's bigger than this, okay, and basically have it as thin as a phone with the touch buttons, like with the real buttons. I'm 100% sure this is doable. If they can make something like that, that would really be the ultimate portable experience in my opinion. But until then, I'm very happy with the GPD XD. That is going to go in my bag from now on. I don't really care what the people think if they see me in public playing that.